There are so many horrific features of this MAGA incompetent regime, but one of the saddest is how emboldened racists have become. They are at an all-time shriek. These people are insufferable. I want to play with you a video of a woman in Florida, a white woman who decides that she's going to play ICE agent and harass a Latino looking family in a car leaving a parking garage. She decides to start asking them where they're from. Kylie, play the clip.
Go home.
So for those of you that are listening, she is at a car, a blonde looking Karen woman, asking this Hispanic family
I'm gonna call the police.
where they're from.
Are you nuts?
She won't leave them alone.
No, I'm from Boca Raton. Driving.
She keeps asking them where they're from. They say they're from Boca Raton.
I was in the car. Go.
Don't.
I'm from your mother.
She keeps asking them where they're from as though it's her business. And then she ultimately looks at them and says, and Kylie, you can stop it here. She looks at them and says, I was born here. And this is one of the worst things that this man has done. And all of the people that voted for him, they like this level of cruelty. Well, at the same time, I bet that racist bitch has no problem going to a Cuban restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, a Mexican restaurant. The cognitive dissonance and the hypocrisy and the cruelty that has come out of this administration to embolden these horrific white people that think they're better than everybody, that they have more of a right to America than anybody else does, is just one of the saddest offshoots of this administration.
I think it's unlocked, in a lot of people that we see, it's unlocked the worst in people, and it's normalized, and it's made it okay to be openly racist to people, to mistreat people based on their ethnicity, where they're from, and it's almost like they've been given a license to act like this, and that's the biggest catastrophic part of this administration for young people too that are growing up. And I know we worry about this with our children, but somehow this normalization that you can treat people like this has set a horrific precedent for generations to come.
And I want to thank Josh for joining us this week while Pumps is on vacation with her children for the Thanksgiving Day break. I want to move along here to a tweet from Greg Sargent on the courage of everyday Americans. And he says, while elite journalists and businessmen kiss the ring of Trump, people in jammies and slippers confront ICE in the street. The courage of ordinary people has been stunning compared to the elite. And I want us to sit and talk about that for a second, because this to me is how you can show your biggest sense of shared humanity, is by standing with those who are picked on and marginalized and bullied, like that woman was doing, that family that was just leaving a parking garage. Those people were American citizens. They just happened to have brown skin. And you have all of these elites, these billionaires that don't have to pay taxes in this country, that grift off of the working class, that go and kiss the ring to Donald Trump. Tim Cook has made, so much money from Apple, and he can't go fight for the people who buy his phones. He fights for this man who is using his Gestapo via ICE to kidnap people off the streets. And then everybody always wonders, like, well, where are the Proud Boys? Where are all of these right-wing extremists that the FBI was talking about are America's terror group? They're all being employed by ICE now. And so I just want to give a shout out to all of the Americans in Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, now in North Carolina, that are going out and standing for our fellow Americans that happen to have brown or black skin, and standing with them and showing far more courage than all of these cowardice billionaires. And I also want to remind people, and this is super duper duper important, the way we're all feeling right now, for the first time, seeing all of these people under attack, this is what Black people have experienced America for their whole lives. This fear is what our Black Americans have felt their whole lives. And so it is a time for us to double, triple, quadruple down on our support for our fellow Americans that live here with us and stand up against this president and all of his billionaire, now trillionaire, fat cat, piece of shit friends, because this is just unacceptable.
And I think we all have a social responsibility to not be complicit in this. And I think what we're seeing with that video, we're seeing day-to-day average Americans that are standing up and not being complicit. And sometimes morally and socially, you have to take a stand. You can't be silent when you see this kind of conduct normalized by this administration. And I see it in the criminal justice system, the blatant racism, the mistreatment, the abuse of marginalized groups. But here, I think we've seen with ICE being deployed across the country, you see normal day-to-day Americans. And it reminds me of a quote by RFK where he said that,
not the crazy one, the dad.
The dad, yeah, I should have prefaced that. But he said that every little bit of change can create a ripple effect if you stand up for goodness, if you stand up for people. And eventually that ripple effect will create a wave. And all of us have to remember that in our day-to-day life. When you see something that's wrong like this, you have to call it out. You cannot be complicit. You can't sit back. And your good deed, your goodness will help create ultimately a wave of goodness if each of us do that in our day-to-day lives.
And I want to remind you that a lot of people will try to provide cover for themselves in daily conversations, and they'll say something like the following to me: well, I'm really proud of your success. We just disagree politically. And my response is always, we don't disagree politically. We disagree ethically and morally. We're completely different people. I am not for denying people due process and kidnapping them off the streets and sending them to CCOT in El Salvador, where these people were sexually abused. I'm not for taking people away from their families with no criminal record and shipping them off to some torture chamber in Africa. And this is happening all the time. I'm not for the law being applied to Donald Trump and his rich friends one way and to Black and brown Americans a different way. We're completely different morally. I really am pro-life in the sense that once a person is born, that I want Americans, hardworking Americans, to be able to live with decency and self-respect and not feel bullied by the ruling class. So we're just, right now, these are not political differences. These are complete moral differences, which brings me to something that is super, really important and kind of devastating at the same time. Put this up, Kylie. The New York Times covered Viola Fletcher, the oldest survivor of the Tulsa race massacre. She dies at age 111. Barack Obama tweets this story and says, as a survivor of the Tulsa race massacre, Viola Ford Fletcher bravely shared her story so that we'd never forget this painful part of our history. Michelle and I are grateful for her lifelong work to advance civil rights and send our love to her family. And I just want to share with you all that as two people that were educated in Oklahoma, this was whitewashed from our Oklahoma history classes. I never learned about the Tulsa race riots until like 5-7 years ago. It was the first I ever heard of it. And this is something right now, as we see so much injustice, that we have to understand that Black Americans have been on the forefront of all of these civil rights movements, and they have organized successfully against patriarchal white supremacist structures. Most recently, Target is a prime example. After this election, Target goes out, cancels their DEI program, seems to go kiss the ring to Trump. The Black community wasn't having it. They silently and very expeditiously and brilliantly organized against Target. In a matter of 3 or 4 months, that CEO was fired and they lost billions of dollars. White Americans need to do a better job collaborating and partnering with Black Americans. They are our equal and they are our brothers and sisters, and they have suffered so much at the hands of white oppression. And they don't have the benefit of generational wealth. And everything that they accomplish in life, especially in America, is far more difficult for them to find success than it is for a white person. And this is just very real. And it's important that we tell them we see you, we hear you, and we're here to fight against racism with you. You're valued. You matter.
And they did. They did in the state of Oklahoma completely whitewash the history of the Tulsa race massacre. And, you know, the more that I've learned about it, it was basically the destruction of a location of Tulsa, basically a systematic plan by the government to go in and set fire to the Black community.
Which was very successful.
Very successful. And they eventually, the name of it has changed to a massacre and not a riot.
Right.
Because people have become educated about what happened. But for us to sit here and act like we in any way can understand the pain or plight of African American people or other marginalized groups would be somewhat disingenuous, because we don't know the pain that they've had to suffer and the difficulties they've had to rise up. But it's important for us, like you said, to see something like that, to honor it, to show that woman and her family respect for what they went through, and do everything within our power to change the system of government and make sure that we're not complicit in any form of racism against any person in this country.
Yes, and it's important to notice that that should have been generational wealth. They had a Black Wall Street. They had built a safe and, albeit they thought it was safe, and productive community, and white people wouldn't allow it because of racism. Just like at the top of this video, that white woman wouldn't allow that Hispanic American family that lives in Boca Raton to exit a garage. And this type of injustice and this type of cruelty is something that, as Josh and I, as white people, have to call on other white people to join this fight with our fellow Americans that are Black and brown. And I want to tie this into this whitewashing that people do, to the whitewashing that's been going on in the Republican Party right now about the fact that Donald Trump has always been a Russian asset. And you have this ruling class that always wants to change history, change facts, ignore facts, and lie to the public. And I just want to remind you, Josh and I knew this at the time because we talked about it a lot. We've always been political junkies, but put up this tweet and headline. Shannon Watts tweets, a reminder that Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan alleged that Donald Trump was a Russian asset back in 2016. House Leader McCarthy suggested Trump on Putin payroll. So think about that. Former Speaker of the Houses, both of them, knew that Donald Trump was on Putin's payroll in 2016, but every single sitting Republican right now whitewashes it and ignores it because they prefer money and racism over the truth. This type of protecting white men is directly linked to the racism that we exposed further. Why does this man get away with it? Could you imagine if Barack Obama, the Black president, if anybody even remotely suggested that he was on Putin's payroll or had given somebody named Bubba a blowjob and Putin had information about it? Can you imagine how the white ruling racist class would have treated that, considering how they treated him when he wore a tan suit?
I can't at all. And I remember you and I discussing specifically that quote and how it was an off-the-cuff recorded conversation. It wasn't planned. Nobody knew they were being recorded. It was a very candid admission by both Ryan and McCarthy that, hey, this guy's got to be compromised by Russia. There's no other way that you could explain basically why he does what he does. And also, it sort of irks me that they've known this. Both of them have chosen to just get out of government, but they've done nothing to sort of advocate a path of correction here to sort
for their country they claim they love.
That's right. They've just exited and probably made millions of dollars in the private sector without any sort of social responsibility to bring attention to this problem and try to correct it within their party.
And the inherent racism in that that they will protect a white man who is a traitor to his country, who is selling American interests down the river for Vladimir Putin because he's white and rich, but they would never, ever, ever do such a thing for a black man. So all of these things in this covering up for Donald Trump is the preference of the ruling class to uphold white supremacy. And I want to leave you with a tweet by one of my favorite people. She is a historian, Ruth Ben-Ghiat of NYU. And she says, this is what I mean by moral collapse. Tucker Carlson asks Witkoff, what do you think of Putin? Witkoff responses, I like him. I thought he was straight up with me. I don't regard him as a bad guy. This is a guy, Putin, who is a war criminal, who kills the opposition in Navalny, murdered the opposition who was going to come unseat him, murdered him, throws oligarchs out the window. And we have this dipshit, this racist dipshit, Steve Witkoff, who was bought and paid for, obviously, by Vladimir Putin, who is obviously bought and paid for Donald Trump. And these white guys get away with this shit because they are white. It is so appalling.
And I think Ruth said it best. I mean, that's a prime example of the moral collapse in our country where that's acceptable. You can openly say that without any fear of blowback. What does that say about our country, where you can praise basically a person like Putin and think that it's socially acceptable to say that?
An anti-American murderous dictator. And he says that on a podcast. And it's just the moral rot that we used to have presidents. Even Reagan would say, okay, Russia bad.
That's right.
You know, this is completely new, that we have American president, American leadership that provide cover for anti-democratic, anti-American despots around the world and actually favor them and collude with them. It is a very new thing in America. All right, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you, Josh, for subbing in all week for Pumps. Please buy our book. It's linked right below in the show notes. It's a great way to support Pumps and me. Subscribe, like this video, drop a comment, tell Josh how he's doing, and we'll be back later with more news.